Prime Minister Narendra Modi has planned the G20 summit in a way that he includes all and one in terms of getting the real voices of various parts of the world and India's strategic partners. It's not just the member states. India has also invited guests to be a part of the G20 summit. And I'm being joined by one of the most important ones in that list, in that category. I have the Prime Minister of Mauritius joining us here on India Today, Praveen Kumar Jagannath. Thank you so much for joining us here on India Today.
Thank you for having me.
Let's begin with the fact that as a guest country, what does Mauritius, which is strategically located, achieve from the summit, and what do you hope to achieve from the summit?
Well, let me first of all thank the Government of India and particularly Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi ji for the invitation. It is, of course, the first time that Mauritius is participating to a G20 Heads of State Summit, and of course it is a great honor and privilege. We are looking forward to constructively engage with G20 members in order to foster global cooperation and see that the challenges that we face, particularly as a small island state, are in fact addressed. I think everyone can draw lessons from the unprecedented COVID-19 pandemic that we have been facing, and not only in terms of affecting the health of the population, but its consequences on the world economy. And this has been aggravated now by the conflict in Ukraine. And also we see that climate change, for example, are affecting all countries. So we are at a juncture where I think this summit comes at a very opportune time for us to draw lessons from what has happened, what is happening, and to see how we can work together to make the global economy more resilient, inclusive, and of course sustainable. So this is the approach of Mauritius.
Prime Minister, sir, the fact that African Union to be included as a member of the G20 is an initiative and a proposal that has been put forth by India. What do you have to say? How do you look at the admission, if at all it happens in this summit, of African Union as part of the G20?
I must say I'm very appreciative of the initiative of Prime Minister Modi, because Africa is a huge continent of maybe more than 1.3 billion people, so many countries, and yet we are not part of so many of the groupings. And I think G20, which consists of so many important members and which forms part of major economies where policies are in fact decided, because we know when you have a majority of the major economies getting together, they set normally the trend. And I think Africa has to be part of it in order to be able to voice out the views of not only Africa, but of those whose voices are not normally heard at those instances. So I am obviously very supportive of the fact that this initiative is on the table, and I hope that Africa would eventually become a member.
Personally, as the Prime Minister of Mauritius, do you think you would want to bid as Mauritius as a country to be a member of the G20 separately?
Well, this is an issue that has to be discussed, first of all, at government level. And so we have to take time and course, we will consider, but as it is today, there is no stand that has been taken with regard to that.
Okay, so we'll wait for a decision from Mauritius. But moving on to the G20 summit itself. Now, India has done and put in a lot of effort. There were more than 200 meetings in over 50 cities. You're here in Delhi, and you'll be seeing the spectacular space that has been created for the leaders at the Bharat Mandapam. But how do you see India's role and India's presidency of the G20?
I must say I'm very pleased to see the initiative that has been taken by India. It has tried to include everybody. And especially when we know that India is playing now a very important role on the international scene. We look at the progress that India has been making, not only in economic terms. Of course, the economy is growing at a fantastic rate, but in terms of improvement and progress in technology, in innovation. Now we have to, I seize this opportunity to congratulate again India for the successful mission of Chandrayaan-3. And all this shows that India is making tremendous progress in practically, I would say, all fields. And Sri Narendra Modi himself, when you look at the stature that he has today, has the possibility to influence more in terms of the policies, in terms of the future that will guide us. So I am happy that India has taken this approach that, and in fact is depicted by the theme that one earth, one family, one future, which is of course derived from the Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, that the whole world is one family. And this is the approach that we should take to see to it that no one is left behind, and that particularly the challenges that we are facing, and I must say that many countries are grappling with the challenges in terms of the effects of, I mentioned before, of the COVID-19, the war in Ukraine. So I think it is important that we get together and that we see India taking this leadership role and also paving the way for a more inclusive global network.
Right. Prime Minister, sir, the fact that Prime Minister Modi has been talking about developing countries and the crisis that now the world faces owing to the Russia-Ukraine war and many other situations, how do you see the G20 really look at the food and energy crisis that faces the world, particularly the developing nations and the global south?
Well, I can speak about what we have gone through recently. You know, with the COVID-19 pandemic, there has been restriction in terms of movement of the people, lockdown, the closure of borders, and all the other measures that we have taken in order to try to protect the health of the population. And this has had a huge impact on the economic situation. And we are still trying to rebound in order to see how we can go back to a more normal life. But we have suffered a lot. And as I say, this has been compounded by the conflict in Ukraine, where there has been a disruption in the production and of commodities, especially for food items, in which Mauritius imports most of its food requirements. So you can imagine how difficult it is, it has been, and it still is for Mauritius to deal with prices of commodities. Government, of course, has acted we have given huge subsidies, but we can only give subsidies, of course, up to a certain period, and of course, depending also on our resources. So, food security is a priority, and I see not only for us as a small island state, but for many countries as well. This is one issue where we need to focus and discuss and see how international institutions also can act and review their regulation so that we have a fairer distribution of food items. Energy is another very important component in which Mauritius has been paying a heavy price because we import all our petroleum products. Prices have been going up, more than up than going down. And we see now that some countries are even restricting the production. In fact, they are decreasing production of petroleum products. Now, this is again compounded by sanctions which are imposed against some countries, namely Russia, which is a major oil exporter. And then there are other countries where there are other issues like Venezuela, Iran. So this situation is, I must say, the least favorable for countries like us to be able to carry on with our development agenda. And therefore, these are the issues that we would, of course, wish to discuss further and see how, we can be supported generally in order that we move and advance in terms of the improvement of standard of living of the people.
Well, food and energy crisis aside, there's another very important issue that is very dear to the Indian administration's heart, particularly Prime Minister Modi, but also how the world community is now talking about it, and island nations have been talking about it for a very long time, such as yours, which is climate change. How do you see the G20 really cope with and tackle to ensure mitigating the impacts of climate change?
Again, I must emphasize the vulnerability of island state like Mauritius. We are witnessing rising sea level, which is more than the average in Mauritius. And we see that, unfortunately, there is erosion of the coastal area. And knowing that Mauritius is a touristic destination, you see how it really is endangering that sector. But apart from that, we are subject to cyclones every year, and now we see that the cyclones are becoming even stronger and stronger. In other parts of the world, we have seen how cyclone and hurricane have devastated some regions or even islands. So this is a very, very serious issue that can only be tackled collectively. No one can say now, and should not be saying, that what one country does is only affecting that country, because it does affect not only its neighbor, but the whole world. And that is why there is urgency to act on this front. I must say, I am a bit disappointed because we have been participating in different COP meetings, the last one that was held, again where countries have committed huge amount of money in order to support countries which have undergone loss and damage, and also countries that are very vulnerable. But we have seen little of that money being really spent. And therefore, it should not remain only as a commitment. And it should not only be on paper that we have a fund for loss and damage. I hope we are working now on the criteria that will be set down in order to allow countries to be able to access to finance. But I can say that, unfortunately, Mauritius, we have requested in the past for financing in terms of improving our infrastructure in order to be able to cope with such situation. For example, the erosion of the coastal area requires a lot of investment. But I must say Mauritius has done its part. We are doing our best in order to mitigate against the effect of climate change. But still, we will require the support of the international community. And again, I'm happy that Prime Minister Modi has raised this issue and has put it also as a priority. And therefore, we are, of course, agreeable on this matter also.
Right. So you make a very important point when it comes to climate change, and it is true that it is a fight between the developed and the developing, and the least developed nations are the worst sufferers. But even when it comes to climate change, I'd say the worst sufferers are the island nations. So a lot of emphasis and importance that needs to be put in how to handle climate change. So thank you so much for that comment. But shifting focus to the Global South, how do you think, what do you think is the role of G20 in promoting sustainable growth and development for the Global South? And how important is the Global South for the G20?
I think that there are a number of countries that are already member of the G20 that have already put issues that are of direct interest to them. But of course, it is a good thing because each country will normally put on the table issues that are of great concern to them. The Global South, islands, small island states like Mauritius, other groupings also. But I think again what is important is that we analyze the challenges that each country is facing. And then, of course, we have to prioritize on how we're going to address those issues. But then we must at least give consideration to each and every one. Because this is the purpose of getting together, having meetings to discuss and debate, and then to take decisions. But the decisions also, again, as I say it, I make it as a parallel to the issue of funding for the small island states in terms of facing climate change. There must be concrete measures that are taken that will address those concerns for each and every country, whether they are a member of a group or a community. They should feel that their issues that are very serious have to be addressed. And this is why I say I'm happy that the Global South is represented, and Prime Minister Modi has even laid more emphasis on the problems faced by the Global South. He has organized a special session. Mauritius has been participating in, I must say, all the meetings prior to the summit, and we have brought our contribution. And of course, I'm happy that as the head of government, I will be I will be voicing the views of not only of Mauritius, but also of small island states, and of course of Africa as well.
Right. But Prime Minister, sir, these are very important areas that they've looked into. But all that will boil down to what is it that is going to be at the end, at the culmination of the summit, which is a joint communique. Now, we've seen the Russia-Ukraine war becoming a matter of contention. How do you see that deadlock really end? Can there be consensus within the G20 on the Ukraine war or many other objections that other countries have raised? Can there be a consensus that can be formed?
Let us first of all take stock of what has happened in Ukraine. I think both Russia and Ukraine have suffered great loss in terms of people, in terms of affecting their own economy, and in terms of the ongoing conflict that is very detrimental to both of them. Now, this is also affecting the whole world. As I say, there is a disruption in terms of the production of commodities. Prices of energy have been going up. In certain countries in Africa, they will not be able to import wheat, for example. And therefore, we need to draw lessons from this. India, for example, I know India has very good relationship with both Russia and Ukraine. India can play an important role, like other countries also. Mauritius, of course, being a small island, we also bring in our contribution. We are also very supportive to see to it that this conflict comes to an end as quickly as possible, and that we appeal to all parties for negotiation, for a diplomatic settlement. And this, I think, will be interest of each and every one. I know it is easier said than put into practice. It is a conflict that is going on for now. I think people thought that, it would end soon, but unfortunately, I see that it is in fact escalating, and therefore there is an urgent need for everyone to try to put in every effort that is possible so that this conflict comes to an end.
Right. Prime Minister, sir, you're here not just for the summit. There are also bilateral meetings that you'd be holding with Prime Minister Modi, and the External Affairs Minister is going to call on you. In terms of Mauritius-India relations, where do you see it headed? How best can we strengthen ties? Because Mauritius, geopolitically and geostrategically speaking, is quite well placed. It's an important country, important island nation. So where do you see the strengthening of ties between the two countries, and how?
I think relationship between Mauritius and India are excellent, and we are in fact closing the celebration of 75 years of diplomatic relations with India, and we can see how over the years this relationship has been growing in strength. I think never before has this relationship reached such heights. And that is due to the will, of course, of both leaders, of both governments, and also from people-to-people relationship. I give you one example to illustrate the consideration that India has for us. In the peak of the COVID pandemic, India was the first country to provide us with vaccine and medical equipment. And when we look at in how many sectors India has been supporting us, both on the technical, on the economic, on the social sectors, you can see the imprint of India in the socio-economic development of Mauritius, everywhere. And I need not list the number of projects that have been financed by Government of India. The last one being, of course, the Metro Express, which is a system of public transport which is really modern and has been a prestigious project. So, yes, we have had a number of engagements with, at the very high level with India. from Prime Minister to Prime Minister, from ministers to ministers. I am meeting with Minister for Foreign Affairs, Dr. Jaishankar. I will be having a meeting with Prime Minister Modi as well. And so let us continue and let us keep on strengthening this relationship, which is, as I say, Prime Minister Narendra Modi has qualified it as super special. So that says it all.
Okay, super special. That's quite nice. But you also mentioned people to people. So in that, if I could say, the fact that you're a Prime Minister, head of government of Mauritius of Indian origin, that speaks volumes of how connected Mauritius and India are. There are so many people of Indian origin in Mauritius. What's your message? What's your message, Prime Minister, sir, to the people of India? And how do you see Prime Minister Modi's soft power policy when he engages people in Mauritius who are of Indian origin or at the diaspora?
Well, we not only have a historic relationship, we have a blood relationship, because indentured laborers came from India to work in Mauritius. Thereafter, there have been migration also, Indians coming to Mauritius. And now, in spite of the fact that our ancestors came with nothing, but through their hard work, they have toiled and make a lot of sacrifices, and they have made tremendous progress. And this without giving away their culture, their tradition, their religion, and generation after generation we have been able to preserve those values. And of course government is giving tremendous support in order that we transmit those values to the next generation. So as you can see, there is a natural communion with people who have originated from India, our ancestors who came from India, and Indians. So, and I must say, we are also very proud when we see the progress that is being made by India. I mentioned about the successful mission of Chandrayaan-3, where India is really taking the lead in the aerospace sector. So we see it as natural, and of course we are an independent country, we are sovereign, we have our stand that we take on the international scene, and we do discuss and we do see how there can be synergy between Mauritius and India. We try to take common stand on certain issues. Of course, not all the time do we see eye to eye, but this is the reality. And but I'm happy that on major issues there can be consensus. And again, this G20 is a platform for us to engage with other countries, including, of course, India, on those priority areas.
So not just historic, but also familial blood ties between India and Mauritius. That's putting it very nicely. But there are challenges. There are challenges when it comes to the two countries, and there are opportunities. Where are the opportunities and where do the challenges lie?
The challenges from the Mauritian perspective is that, for example, we have a huge maritime exclusive economic zone, 2.3 million square kilometers. And as you know, there have been a lot of problems that we have been facing in the Indian Ocean. There has been a problem of piracy, of drug trafficking, of illegal fishing, of smuggling of illicit products. So all these are of great concern to us, and to countries of the region. And therefore, for example, with regard to piracy, I am happy that there has been international cooperation which has largely made a decrease in piracy. Today, you can say that it is, the waters have been well policed, and we have clamped down a lot on piracy. But likewise, we need to do more in order to, face and track those illegal activities like fishing and drug trafficking. So, Mauritius, we of course have limited resources, and we need to partner with other countries. Like India, for example, we have an agreement with India on maritime security and surveillance. We have an agreement with France, whereby with Réunion Island there is cooperation in terms of military exercise. We have an agreement with the United States of America, and where there are operations that are conducted with the participation of Mauritius, USA, and some friendly African countries. So this cooperation is crucial in order for us to be able to, let's say, have law and order in the Indian Ocean. And I salute the initiative of Prime Minister Modi for security and in the region, the Sagar initiative, which is to me very important. Now, we also have other opportunities, and we are happy that we are the first African country to have concluded a trade agreement with India, the SECPA, which is working well, because we see that the export of Mauritius towards India has been increasing, and of course the export of India towards Mauritius has always been huge. But this is a win-win situation, and we need to enlarge this agreement. Of course, this is the first step, and we will be making proposals. We will be discussing with India, so that we want to see that Indian businesses seize this opportunity that Mauritius offers in order to penetrate the African market. Because we are a very stable country, we are safe, we have a very trusted and transparent financial sector, which is recognized now by FATF, where we satisfy and we are compliant or largely compliant with all the 40 requirements. We have an independent judiciary. I mean, all those are really advantages that businesses look to, and we have taken a number of measures to facilitate business in Mauritius. So my appeal to Indian companies is to seize this opportunity, where now Africa is a huge market. Mauritius is a signatory to the African Continental Free Trade Area, which covers 1.3 billion people, and therefore the market is huge. And we are seeing a growing middle class in Africa, in spite of problems that are faced by certain countries, tensions. But the fact is that economies are growing, and therefore this is again an opportunity for entrepreneurs in India to seize this opportunity in order to do business. And so I can see on a number of other sectors where there can be even more cooperation. We are going to have an agreement with ISRO again, and this comes at a very opportune time because, as I say, India is now a leader in in space innovation, and therefore there is a lot of I would say a lot of good things
Are
coming.
you looking at a space cooperation between India and Mauritius?
Yes, we in fact we are already agreeable to the terms and conditions of an agreement, and it's very likely that in the very near future there will be we will be signing an agreement.
Okay. Scientists of both sides working together? Not
Yes,
bad.
and we want to encourage our youth also to take up science subjects, and why not see what are the opportunities that lies ahead for them.
Right, sir. So, okay, from the space of space cooperation to a little lighter, on a lighter note, if I could ask you, you're of Indian origin. Do you or your family, does anybody watch Hindi films or Indian cinema? What's your favorite film or favorite song, if you have any?
Well, the song Bharat Ka Rane Wala Hoon by Mahendra Kapoor in the film of Pura Bar Pachin, I think is very appropriate right now.
Okay, that's a
And
nice one. Yes,
I
yes.
do, of course, I do listen to a number of songs from time to time, but I won't say that there is one particular favorite.
Okay.
But Mauritians are very fond of Indian movies, and they have been watching Singham series. And I had the pleasure of meeting Rohit Shetty when he came to Mauritius, because he is now planning to shoot the next series of Singham
Oh, wow.
in Mauritius.
And who are the stars? Are they big
With
faces?
the stars, there are
you're
stars
supposed to,
coming to Mauritius, but I think I will leave him to then,
Announce.
publicly say who are the stars who are coming. But again, this is going to put Mauritius on the map
Yes.
in terms of publicity.
Yes.
And I hope that this will attract Indians to come and visit Mauritius.
Yes, Indians and also a lot of other filmmakers, because that's a nice revenue stream for Mauritius. But it's a very nice thing that you just said in terms of how the two countries connect. It's not just economic, strategic, but it's also people to people, and the Indian cinema that is now connecting the two countries. And he picked up a very important song, भारत का रहने वाला हूँ, भारत की बात सुनाता हूँ. आज G20 summit हो रहा है और भारत की बात सुनाने वाला है. With the projection of India that you'd be seeing, India is going to be on the global map when it comes to the G20 summit, and how India is hosting the G20 summit. On that note, sir, thank you so much for joining us here on India Today.
Thank you, and if I can say, भारत की हार्दिक स्वागत के लिए बहुत धन्यवाद.
If you like the video, do like, comment, share and subscribe.